Hey, welcome to round 4 of my Blue-White Spirit Delver League that I'm reviewing. We're up against Giorgio, something like that, and we're keeping this hand. That's a Delver, it has some cantrips. We don't have any forces for the silly turn 1 Tybalts, but I think this is a keep. It's just not very cantrip intensive. So our opponent starts on a Bloodstained Mire, and we draw a Clarion Spirit. At this point, the normal play would be to play Delver of Secrets on turn 1. I have no clue what my opponent is on. I haven't played them before, but Bloodstained Mire does give me an indication of what they could play. Bloodstained Mire Go and gives me strong hints of them being on some sort of a combo or all-in deck. So what I decide to do here is just pass with mana open. I don't have enough information to know what I'm pondering for yet, but I want to keep the brainstorm open just in case I need a Daze or a Force of Will. Here they go for the Entomb. I think fighting over Entomb is usually the best way in game 1 especially to fight Reanimator, since they have more ways to get cards out of their graveyard than to get them in there. So I decide to brainstorm in response, and I see this. More land, more Delver, and a Sorcerer's Plowshares. This isn't great for me. I should expect them to just do their strategy as it's meant to be done. But just in case they don't get there, I'm going to put back a land and I'm going to protect my Sorcerer's Plowshares from a discard spell. So they take their second turn, they play a Badlands, so now we know they're on Black-Red Reanimator, and they reanimate their Gristlebrand around a Daze. We didn't have Daze, so it's very good for us that they have to use a Reanimate, since that makes it such that they can't draw 7 twice. But they draw 7 once, which is usually good enough. They do, they unmask me, and they see my hand of creatures and cantrips. They decide to take my Delver, and that the safest way to close out the game is to reanimate my Delver. They had 8 cards in hand, so they just want to use the cards that they have, else they're discarding something. And they unmask me again. So at this point, they get to strip my hand. They decide to take the Ponder, since they're basically like, they know that what I have in my hand doesn't beat them. So they just decide to take the Ponder. Of course, I have the Sorcerer's Plowshares in my hand on top of my deck, so I have that now. I'm going to put some pressure into play and just pass the turn back to them. I'm looking to see if they show me some information, but the main reason I'm waiting on the Sorcerer's Plowshares is such that they don't get information before deciding whether they want to attack with the Delver or not. They decide to attack with both. I Sorcerer's Plowshares their Gristlebrand and decide not to trade the Delver of Secrets. I think my pressure on their life total is more important than the other way around, and I have a Predict. So being able to scry in my upkeep basically, or look at the top card of my library in my upkeep with Delver. Like here I see Misty Rainforest. I don't need the Misty Rainforest, and the Clarion Spirit isn't putting up a lot of pressure if I play it this turn. So I just decide to predict myself. So I get the Misty Rainforest out there, and I find a Force Will and 2 Dazes. So I don't think the Dazes are too great here. But I do like the Force of Will. And they find the Dark Ritual, so now my Dazes certainly don't do anything. And they decide, I think correctly, that their life total is more important than mine, so they keep their flipped Delver back. I have no information about the top of my library, but I find a third Daze. And like I said, I don't think the Daze is doing much here, so I'm going to fetch it away. And I draw a Skyclave Apparition. And that's great for me, of course, since this means I get to put pressure on them. I remove my Delver, actually, which is actually cute, that if the Skyclave Apparition dies now, I get a 1/1, since it goes to the owner. And I just get some attacks in here while keeping my Force of Will up. I do play the Clarion Spirit here. It's a bit worse if they have a main deck Elisnorn or the Worm that gives -2/-2 to my entire board. As I could beat those by Source Plowshares and then post board and then getting and then playing the Clarion Spirit on my turn and have pressure again. But they usually don't have the main board if they do have them. And I think that being resolving a Clarion Spirit here is more likely to make me win through second Griselbrand, which is the most likely card that they can reanimate. They don't find anything and they scoop this game up. Now, for game 2, I board in all my graveyard hate, which is like the 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Relic, 1 Torment Script, and 1 Surgical Extraction. I board in a Path to Exile over Swords of Plowshare, since I just think it's better to not give them life if they get a Griselbrand into play. And I decide that the Clarion Spirits and Skyclave Apparitions just don't put out on enough pressure. I basically get a deck full of counters and creatures post board, and have some Swords of Plowshares left because I like to fight over some of the smaller creatures they can have, but I also think that, like in game 1, you can sometimes just win through a Griselbrand if they have to reanimate or something. So that's what I'm doing. I was thinking about boarding in the Lavinias, but I'm not sure how good it is. Basically, the only thing it hits is a Mask, or like a turn 1 Dark Ritual combo, but then it's too late. It can stop a Petal, but Petals also usually come down before Lavinia. So there's like the situation where they get a Griselbrand into play after I have Lavinia in play. And there I think Lavinia can be good, besides just being a 2-mana 2/2. But I think in that spot, having a Path to Exile or Source Plowshares might actually be better. So that's why I decided to keep the Lavinia in my sideboard and keep a couple of Source Plowshares in my deck in game 2. So we're on the draw here. We see a pretty decent hand. We have a land, the 2 land, a relic, a force with the blue card, and then we have the Source Plowshares just in case. They start by revealing a Chancellor, which of course could be pretty bad for us if they go on turn 1, but they end up just casting a Faithless Looting, discarding the Chancellor and the Griselbrand. Now we can use our Bauble to get rid of the Chancellor trigger, to make sure we get rid of the Chancellor trigger, and this is very interesting information for us. So I target them with the Bauble, so I just want to know as much information as I can, and I see that they have an Entomb. This is pretty bad for me, since I have 1 relic to fight with their graveyard. But I was hoping that I could slowly grind through their graveyard with the relic and don't have to crack it immediately. Or if I do have to crack it, that they can't restock it. So seeing an Entomb is pretty annoying for me. They end up not having a reanimation spell, which of course is way better than what I was hoping would happen. And here I make a mistake. I think there's a chance I have to brainstorm this turn. If they try to do something, and then if they discard something out of my hand, a creature, they can reanimate it. While if I have Relic up, they can never reanimate one of my creatures. I think it's very minor here because I don't have a good creature in my hand. But it wasn't something, I don't even think it matters here because I don't have a good creature in my hand. But I didn't think of it in that moment. I just did the usual thing where you just activate Relic as soon as you can, since they get less options into their graveyard. So like now they played Bloodstained Mire. If I waited, they could have gotten that into the graveyard and still had the Chancellor around. But, so I actually think it was correct here. But I didn't think of it. So that's something to keep in mind. Relic against Reanimator decks, decks that can reanimate stuff from your graveyard, it's not always good to just instantly get cards out of their graveyard. So that was pretty much a mistake, even though it was probably correct in this spot. They go for the Assassin's Trophy on my relic. I'm considering just using Force of Negation on this, since it's pretty hard for them to win through a relic. But I do know that they have an Entomb in their hand. So I know that just using relic to get rid of their graveyard if they reanimate something onto it isn't gonna win me the game on the spot. Since they do have an Entomb to get something else into their graveyard. Like if they exhume, I have to respond, correct the relic, and then they entomb, and I can't do anything about that, like if I force here. So I decide that I go for value. I decide to crack the relic, just get rid of their Faithless Looting and their Gristlebrand, and keep the Force of Negation around. I don't know how correct or not that is, but that was my reasoning at least. Here I find more forces and more land, so I just get rid of 2 lands and still don't have any pressure in play, which is kind of an issue. A big issue. But here they entomb. Because I got rid of their graveyard before, I just want to... That's the axis I'm fighting over. I'm fighting over, do they get stuff in their graveyard or not? I think it's usually better in game 1, but especially in game 2. If you have graveyard hate in your deck, it's usually better to just make sure they don't have anything in the graveyard. Since that's the axis we have most interaction with. We see a bubble on top of our source places on top of our library and fetch it away. Draw a card. Now we finally have pressure. It's a bit annoying that we get it in their turn, so if they play a discard spell, we have to throw it away. But we get it into play now and start going from there. So we get to see what they do. They do nothing. We get to flip it with our Delver with a Predict, and at this point I'm pretty happy with our spot, but the amount of lands they have actually make our Spell Pierce and Daze pretty bad. And I was thinking about Force of Willing their Combo Therapy here, but basically what they're gonna do when it resolves is name Force of Will anyway, so I think it's better to just let it resolve. They entomb their Gristlebrand and cast. Sorry, I thought they would entomb Gristlebrand here. I think this is an interesting spot. I'll go back a short bit. So they take the Force of Will and then they entomb. I was thinking about casting Predict here. Because I don't think I have a lot of options to fight through whatever nasty creature they find, but I do have Spell Pierce plus Daze if they try to reanimate this turn, but they know I have that. So I thought it was an interesting spot, like if they know I have that, so there's a chance that they just start with like a Dark Ritual or something. But I think that if they get a Gristlebrand here, it's very tricky for them to draw cards, since they can't do much else this turn, since then my Spell Pierce and they do get active, and I can Brazen Borer their Gristlebrand. At that point they're at 8, and that's basically just, I have so much pressure on them. If they have a Reanimate in their hand, which is basically the way the easiest way for them to get around my Spell Pierce and Daze, they go to 7 by Reanimating, so that's not an out for them. So I decide that I think my spot here is good enough that I don't need to predict and rather keep up my spells, as it's just so low chance that I actually hit like a force with the predict. So to my surprise, kinda, they go for Grave Titan here, but I think the reason they do that is because they do have the Reanimate. Reanimate on Gristlebrand is pretty bad here for them, since they would go to 7, can't draw any cards. I bounce it with Brazen Borer, and then they're on a very fast clock. But they reanimate a Grave Titan now, which means they go to 9. But Grave Titan doesn't actually do anything here. So I'm like, yeah, I don't think that matters, so I just let it resolve. I could Spell Pierce plus Daze it, but I'm like, if they don't do anything with their land, the rest of this game, or this turn. I think it's good for me. I get punished by abrupt decay. But I decide that it's better to just do it like this. I let the Grave Titan resolve, take up therapy me in response since they know my hand. I Brazen Borer, just cast it. Now I have 6 points of flyers on the board. And I untap and just have a very quick clock. So I could have fought there and not have them get their Gristlebrand or Grave Titan into play, but I don't think that was worth it. I take the risk of playing into Abrupt Decay, but now they're basically dead. So they hit me again, but this is game over. The ritual, they tap their mana, they play another ritual, and now their hand is empty and they scoop. I thought this game was kind of interesting. There were some spots where I was like, I'm just gonna lose this because they have so many mana and they get the Entomb Reanimates off. But their life total was such that the Reanimate was actually not the good card there. So I just let them do what they wanted to do here and got through with it in the air. And there's a consideration to try and counter the Reanimate there. But I was afraid that if I counter the Reanimate and they animate the Grave Titan, first off, I don't get Brazen Borer into play that turn if I counter the Reanimate, since I need my spell base for that. So then don't put any additional pressure on them, I just have the Delver. Then I counter the Reanimate so they don't lose life, so they're still at 15. And then the turn after, they animate dead the Grave Titan that's still in their graveyard at that point. Now they are at 12, they have a Grave Titan in play, and I have to try and raise that. I think there's a chance I still get out ahead in that spot, but I think the chance of them having Abrupt Decay is low enough, and me winning against the Grave Titan coming back into play was so likely that I like what I did there. I was mostly afraid of them just spending my turn countering it, using both of my counter spells, them untapping and just animate deading their Grave Titan or something like that. And at that point, I'm in a pretty bad spot, I think. So this is what I went with. It won me the game, but it was a risk against a potential Abrupt Decay. So please join me for the last round if you like this, and see you.